Good everyone, in this video today we have a starter premium tier list for War Thunder. We've obviously covered the starter packs, so now I'm going to take a look at all of the different starter premiums that you get if you obviously choose a specific nation. Now I'll not be covering boats as I do not have enough experience in naval to cover boats, so if you are here for boats, so destroyers and patrol boats, PT boats, etc., I'm afraid those are not here. Before I begin, in the description below, there's going to be a timestamp to the suggestions, because, well, you'll realise when I show the vehicles that I do, there's a good reason why they need changes. There's not many that I think need changes, personally speaking. Obviously, some may disagree with me. I personally think a lot of these starter premiums are actually pretty alright. It's just quite, like, a few of them do need changing to help the player base. The only one I wanted to change that I can't is the L640, which is right here. This is something I wanted to change because two crew vehicle, I mean, the Cambronne at least has armor, but this just isn't adequate enough for me. But couldn't really find anything that would suit it. But anyway, so we're going to start out with the planes because I know that's going to be something that people prefer to look for. Like, they tend to want to look at the planes. And we will obviously go through to the tanks eventually. I'm doing them just in a random order, but they're mostly in nation order, so that's at least something. Now, of course, this does also apply if you choose to buy these vehicles as part of a sale. Some of these are somewhat unique. I mean, we've got the M39, which is somewhat, and also the Palias D510. But other than that, these are pretty much copy-paste of the tech tree vehicles. Okay, now that's all explained, let's get into the tier list. And we're starting off with the F3F. So obviously I haven't thought of any creative names for the tiers this time, because there's nothing really that would really suit it. But anyway, so the F3F. This is one of my favourite starter premiums, and is definitely one of the most competitive out of all this lot. And I'll be honest, there's no other tier for it than S. Like, this is an absolute monster of an aircraft. It's got great maneuverability, decent firepower, decent engine power for a biplane. It's got like 1,000 horsepower nearly. It's got single drop bombs now, which really helps it out. It can beat I-15s in a in a vertical fight. Sorry, it can sometimes beat them in a horizontal fight, but it depends on the speed management. But this thing is an absolute beast and can really mess people's day up if they know what they're doing in it, at least. The amount of times I've done loop-de-loops in an F3F because of the extra engine power over a I-15 Biz or something like that, it's really funny, and I must admit it's definitely something that really helps out. And now we move on to the Flegals. This is one that is proposed to get a change by me, so if you've already skipped ahead, you would have known this by now. Maybe. Depends on how quick you skim through the video, I guess. But that's your decision. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to put it right down at D tier. This is not a good plane for teaching a new player War Thunder at all. It does have redeeming factors in the fact that it's got good speed for what it is, because obviously it is one of the few monoplanes that the starter premiums offer, but I just don't think it helps them get into the game very well. Its engine power is extremely weak at only around 600 horsepower. Its guns, whilst they are good, they can be a bit finicky for a new player to learn, but to be honest, I'd rather have MG17s than MG15s. And just overall, the flight model of the aircraft is rather unforgiving, in my personal experience, and a lot of people have reported it being quite well, shall we say, not the best. This is just something that you have to deal with. Obviously, in arcade, it's a lot better. I've flown this aircraft in arcade; it's actually pretty good. But in LRB, which is mainly where these reviews are focusing, well, these tiers are focusing on, this is just something that you have to bear in mind, unfortunately. Next, we have the Krasnolutski's I-15 Biz. This is one that I haven't actually reviewed yet, and it is on my to-do list. Now, it is still an I-15 at heart, so I'm going to put it in A tier, because this is still a decent aircraft. It's got good maneuverability, not the best speed, but, well, it's a Russian biplane, that's to be expected, unless it's not a Chaika. But it's not too bad. Like, the guns aren't the most forgiving. Obviously, I've not took this plane out just yet, but obviously I've flown the I-15s enough as it is. Um, and it is definitely one where I could go, yeah, it's pretty solid. Like you get bombs on it, you get rockets, which is unlike pretty much every premium in this tier list. This is the only one that carries rockets. Whilst they're not very good, the fact is you can fire rockets at people and make them crap themselves, and that's pretty funny. But the simple fact of the matter is it does obviously have flaws, so it won't be F3Fs in a vertical fight. That is for certainty. And its guns can be rather weak sauce if you're not prepared for them. So just bear that in mind, is all I'll say. But other than that, for what you get for this vehicle, it's not bad at all. And it can certainly be worse, I would say. Next, we come to Tux Gladiator Mark II. This is a British premium, which I was debating changing, but I think it's okay enough. But I'm gonna put the Gladiator in B tier. This is an aircraft that doesn't really excel in anything. It does have good guns, having four 7.7 Brownings, which are pretty much flamethrowers at the BR you get. The problem is the Gladiator's lost a bit of its touch. It's one of those aircraft that used to be pretty dang good, and obviously with the modern meta these days at this sort of BR, it's just lost a bit of its touch. I don't think it's a bad plane. It's just something that I wouldn't consider as a starter premium for a new player. Like, I wouldn't suggest going with British Air because the British tech tree is not forgiving in the early stages, and it's certainly not forgiving once you get into the jet tiers for some vehicles at least. So, as far as I'm concerned, that's where that has to go. Another aircraft I was debating changing, which we're going to talk about now, is the A5M. This is Hajiri's A5M. I've actually covered this video in a history video I used to do about 2 or 3 years ago. Fortunately, though, it's going to have to go in C tier. I'm not trying to put one of each in each tier, by the way. This is just my personal opinion. The Hajiris does have good metrics. It does do maneuvering extremely well. The 7.7s are quite weak sauce, but if you get used to that, you're going to be fine under Japanese tech tree for the most part. The problem is whilst it does teach a good few aspects, it doesn't really encourage people to learn anything. It's very handheld, unlike a lot of these planes. Like the F3F is also quite handheld, so the I-15, but at least those teach you a few tricks. The Hejiri's just teaches you turn and burn and not really anything else. It doesn't have any bombs, it doesn't have any rockets, it doesn't have anything. It just has crap guns and it's pretty alright performance, but this isn't something I would recommend to a new player. Purely because of the firepower and its fragile nature, because it's the most fragile vehicle in this list, and I'll be honest, no, I wouldn't give a new player a fragile aircraft, especially with the way that War Thunder is right now. Next, we come to the Chinese with the Hawk 3. This is one that I personally enjoy quite a lot. Obviously, I've reviewed the BF2C1 Goshawk in the American tree, so this is very similar. It's just got a few changes. It's got a better prop, better engine, etc. So there is some positives to it, and it is definitely the best CAS aircraft out of this lot. Let's put it that way. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in the A tier. It's relatively maneuverable to the point where I've even beaten I-15s in this thing, with some practice, that is. And it is definitely something that has great metrics in the War Thunder low tier, shall we say, meta, if that's the word I would use. It is definitely something that obviously does have its flaws. Its landing gear takes half an hour to come in, so you are going to be a little bit slower at the climb. But other than that, it's got relatively good maneuverability. As I said, I've beaten I-15s in this thing before. Its bomb load is one 500-pounder and four 100-pounders, which is the best bomb load out of all of these vehicles combined, to give you an idea. It's also got, I believe, single drop on its bombs now, so you get 5 bomb drops, which is pretty dang nice. And it can do a decent number on a base if you let it. This thing can do a lot, and for a low tier starter premium, this is one of the best. I don't think it's as good as the F3F. No, the F3F does have advantages over it. But the fact is that this little fella, even though it's only armed with 230 cals, it definitely does a lot more than the other planes can contend to. Next, we come to Mark Collins CR42CN. This used to be the starter premium for Germany, but obviously once the Italian tech tree started, this is where this aircraft came into its stride in the Italian tech tree. Once again, I'm going to put this in B tier. This is a very good plane. It has great performance and everything. It has decent handling. It's not the most maneuverable biplane in the lot. I think it's actually the least maneuverable out of this lot. But, well, I'd say least maneuverable. The Fliegels were like a word, but the CL-42 isn't really focused on dogfighting. It's more of a boom and zoom kind of biplane, so it is one of those that is a bit interesting when it comes to it. And it is definitely one that is it's definitely the heaviest arm because it's got two Predator Fat, but still, which are 12.7. The F3F only has one 7.62 and a 50 caliber M2 Browning, but the Predator Fats are pretty strong at the minute. Unless you're like me and you took it into a video with stealth and your aim was crap. Just don't run a stealth belt, please. But other than that, it's the only aircraft in this tier list that has HE rounds that isn't a cannon. There's a reason why, because we're going to cover a cannon in a moment. But this is definitely an aircraft that I wouldn't advise for a new player to begin with. It is still quite forgiving with its guns, and its performance is definitely one of the best. But personally speaking, this is just something that I wouldn't really talk about too much. It's nothing where I would go, yeah, this is the one I would pick if I had to pick something. No. Now we come on to an aircraft which I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of flack for this decision, the Palliers D510, one of my favourites. And as much as it pains me to do it, it's going in D tier. I'm being sarcastic. It's going right up at S tier. This is easily one of the best starter premiums. Now, it does have some flaws before anyone jumps in the comments. Its ammo load is not forgiving, and its cannon can be a bit finicky, especially with the changes that we keep getting. But this is easily one of the best starter premiums. I don't think it beats the F3F, personally speaking. If you want a starter premium, take the F3F and then this. But personally speaking, I've always had fun with the Palliers. This is just what it can do best. It's great for its climb. It outclimbs a lot of planes in the BR. Its cannon is devastating to a lot of planes, especially bombers, and can definitely do a lot of work in that regard. Now, of course, when it comes to that, the fact that its ammo is so low, you have to consider that. And for a new player, this will teach you trigger discipline. It will also teach you that you're not always going to be able to finish a game with one ammo load. And not only that, it might even teach them belt management, because sometimes you might have to load the ground target belt and go after tanks. So that is definitely something that I really do think players could benefit from, and this is easily one of the most forgiving aircraft for doing so. That's all I'm going to say. And finally, we come to Icobe's J8A. This is one that I obviously pretty much covered with the Gladiators, the Tux Gladiator. But it does have worse guns, but I'm still going to put it in B tier. This is... It does have a little bit worse of a climb as well, because it only has a two-bladed prop, as opposed to a three. And that does obviously impact its climb a little bit, does impact its performance a little bit, but it's nothing too major, so I'm not going to put it in C tier. But it's scraping C tier almost, let's put it that way, because the guns have really fallen off. They're not the same as the British guns. Although from what I've read, apparently these are supposed to be they did have British guns in them, apparently, if I've heard rumours right. But, like I said, I wouldn't really call it the most forgiving. And like I said, with it having a two-bladed prop as opposed to a three, a Tux will beat this every single time. So, yeah, that's just my opinion. And now we move on to tanks, where we can actually talk about some decent tanks for once. So, we have the American M2A4 Stuart, which is the 5th Armoured Division one, I think it is. And this is a perfectly solid vehicle, and it's going right up at A tier. It doesn't have the best armor. It doesn't have the... Well, it actually has... I think it's got the third best gun out of this lot, if memory serves. In terms of raw penetration, that is. And it's definitely one of the faster vehicles out of this lot. It's definitely one that is quite forgiving as well, because it has not only a coaxial machine gun, but it's also the only vehicle in this list that has a roof machine gun, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for a new player, They do tend to go after planes a bit, and a 30 cal is nothing to sneeze at when we've got biplanes running around with fragile engines. So you never know, this might actually teach a new player that sometimes taking a pot shot at a plane if it's going by with your roof machine gun, nothing to sneeze at. Obviously, not every nation does have vehicles that have that, but I think this is just one benefit of it. The 37 is also very forgiving, with it having 89 millimeters of penetration, and I think it's 87 now. They changed it slightly, but it is definitely one where you can go, yeah, this is pretty good. I mean, it's got good armor to some extent. It can stop most machine guns. Obviously, it won't be stopping cannons because that's the entire point of a light tank. But the gun mantlet can sometimes take a hit, which is always nice. The gun will be able to go through pretty much anything you're going to come across, and its ballistics are very friendly to a new player. This is easily one of the best. And not only that, the mobility is ridiculous on this thing. Next, we come to the Panzer II DAK. I'd be stupid if I didn't put it in S tier, that's for sure. Whilst it does have a magazine, it's one of two vehicles in this tier list that have a magazine. The fact is you're firing a lot of HFAB, and at 1.0/1.3, a lot of vehicles are armoured just like that little Stuart there. And if you get the first shot off, which you can because you have a stabilized 20, shoulder stabilized 20, this is something where you can go, yeah, I think I can make this thing a pretty fair choice. And like I said, it's definitely one way you can go, yeah, this is pretty fun. It's got pretty alright armor as well. Like the turret can take a hit or two. The hull is 35/30 millimeters thick, so it's pretty well armored as well for a reserve tank, that is. And it's not bad. I mean, it does struggle because obviously the HVAP did receive quite a big nerf a while ago, about 18 millimeters of penetration. So you're only penning around 46 millimeters of pen, but to be honest, given most of the tiers that you're going to be fighting at with this thing early on, it's not bad at all. Like, you really cannot complain about this. And like I said, 10 shots where you're going dum 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 dum. Just, come on. Who would not want that? Let's put it that way. Next, we come to the T-26 First Guards. I've re-reviewed this thing about, I think, a few months ago. And, yeah, there's a good reason why I'm slapping it in C tier. The only reason why it's not in D tier is because of the gun. Let's put it that way. This is a tank that is the definition of not new player friendly. You get glass armor. It's not the worst armored vehicle on this list, but it's close to it. I mean, the A13 does have spot parts where it's even weaker by like 1 millimeter, but at least the A13 has overlaps. This does not. The T-26 is barely scraping the bottom of the barrel of C tier because of the gun, which is the 45 millimeter. Very forgiving gun. I do like it, and it's definitely something that I do think is kind of needed. And this is just something that you have to go, yeah, this is just awful for a new player. It's slow with a top speed of 19 miles per hour, which takes it forever to get to. And whilst the gun is very forgiving, the fact is it's a 15mm armed or armored tank, which can be topped down from the engine deck by a biplane. That's all I need to say in that regard. Next, we have the A13 Mark I 3rd Royal Tank Regiment. It's going to go in B tier. This is one where I would have put it in A tier, but given the amount of autocannon spam, this poor little fella gets ripped apart, and it faces a lot of autocannons. It faces the Swedish autocannons, the German autocannons, even the Russian autocannon on the T60. And yeah, this poor little fella just can't keep up anymore. It is still a good tank. It has one of the best guns in the tier, and one of the best out of this list, with it having the British 2-pounder, and also access to APHE in the same gun as well. So if you need to use a little less pen, you certainly can do. But the simple fact of the matter is, this is a perfectly acceptable gun and can definitely do a lot of work. The thing is, though, is when it comes to autocannons, this poor thing just gets torn to pieces. And yeah, this is definitely one where I can go, yeah, no, this is definitely not one that I would say is A tier anymore, but it's certainly no slouch. All I'll say is don't expect this thing to be doing a huge amount of work. Next, we come to the Hargo Commander. This is one where I'm really just not even going to bother. It's going in D tier. This is one of the worst tanks that you can give to a new player. With 34 millimeters of penetration, it has the worst penetration on this list, and that is saying something. It has 10 to 12 millimeters of armor in the vast majority of places, with one exception being the 30 millimeters of turret's front armor, which is the best part of it. But the fact that the gun is so poor, whilst the mobility is so good, why can't we have a later model one with a better gun? Obviously, I'm not going to be suggesting that. I'm going to be suggesting something very similar to a Hargo for a change. But yeah, I'm not impressed with this thing and really should not be a starter premium. Next, we come to the L640 31st Regiment. I have covered this in a review before. This, as I said, I wanted to change it. I wanted to try and find a different vehicle, but Italy has pretty much nothing other than captured vehicles, and I'm not going to put a captured vehicle in a tech tree. I want to try and keep it to some extent. I just want to try and how can I say it? I want to try and keep it unique. So I want to try and keep it to the special tech tree, so to speak. I want it to be domestically produced from that nation. I don't want it to be a captured vehicle to replace something that is already domestically produced, if that makes sense. If you understand what I mean, then that's good. But if you don't, I'll just dumb it down a bit more and just explain it a little bit better. Basically, I want to try and replace every vehicle that I'm featuring in the bad parts of this list, apart from the Hajiris, because I still think that's still got good metrics. I do want to try and do that to some extent. Obviously, the L640 is one of those also vehicles that I can't replace because I just don't know what there is. But the L640 obviously does have the same 20mm, give or take, as the Panzer II, and it's definitely something that is where I can go, it's something. It's got good metrics, but it's just not good enough for a new player. And like I said, there's nothing I can really think of that can replace this, so yeah, I don't really need to talk about it any further, but it's got good metrics, its mobility is still pretty good, and its HVAP is still pretty good, but I don't think it's that great. Next is the Chinese T-26 number 531. It's an exact clone of the Russian tank. I'm not really going to go any further on that. It should be a different turret, which I've been asking for years, but Gaijin ignore me, so there you go. Next, we come to the H39 Cambronne, and I'm going to have to put this up at B tier. This is something people may not expect, but the Cambronne actually used to be even worse. If it was back in the day where it was even worse, I would have put it in C tier and I would have found a replacement. But its armor actually holds up a bit better because of volumetric now. Its gun is a lot better, and whilst it isn't the fastest vehicle in this tier list, it's not the slowest because the T-26 are even slower than this thing, to some extent. And it's also the most heavily armoured, with around 40 to 45 millimeters in most places, with some overlaps even touching 70. This thing's quite heavily armoured for what it is, and is definitely the best experience of a pseudo-heavy tank, if I put in quotation marks, that a new player can experience. So, there you go. I think that pretty much colorizes that. And finally, we come to the Stridsvagn M39. Well, we have to end on a good note, and that's an A tier. This is a cracking little tank. It's got the best gun in the tier, as long as you use the Sabo, that is. It's also got pretty good mobility. The turret armor is also still pretty good. And it's pretty solid. It's also the only tank in this tier list, fun little fact, with 2 coaxial machine guns. There you go. That's another little metric. It is one of the worst armored ones, with around 13 millimeters of penetration. Armor protection. It has 105 on its Sabo at 10 meters. But it does make up for that. It's got an APHE round if you need it. It does have a standard AP round, which is awful. But most of the time, you're going to be using the APHE round, and if you really need to crack something, you use the Sabo. And trust me, the Sabo is one of the most forgiving on this tier list, and is easily one of the better tanks on this tier list. So, that is the end of the tier list itself. I'm going to cut us ahead to the different vehicles, and, well, let's go take a look at them. And welcome to, well, all I'm going to say is if you jumped ahead, you've missed quite a bit of the video, let's put it that way, because we've been there a while, and I had to stop and take a quick drink break because my throat is starting to die. So obviously, I don't have changes for all of the vehicles that are in the lower tiers, because I just can't find anything. But I'm going to start off with one that I think would just be a bit of a better solution. So this is the Russian BT2. This is a vehicle that is definitely one that can be quite competitive in its way. Obviously, it does have a bit of a different gun than the regular BT5s, but I think we can kill two birds with one stone using this. Whilst it isn't going to be the best vehicle for a new player, obviously the gun is a bit it's alright. It's got around 50mm of penetration from what I've seen, with the calculator that is. And all I'll say is this is definitely one where you can go, yeah, this is pretty respectable. It obviously is just like a BT5, so it's going to be pretty familiar territory for a newer player. It's obviously going to have a different gun, which you're going to have to get used to, but the fact is you could put this in as a premium for one of the many tank regiments this thing saw action in, but you can also put it in the tech tree, because people have wanted this in the tech tree. I am one of them, and I would love to see that happen. So all I will say is this is definitely something where you can go, yeah, this is a pretty respectable vehicle, and it's definitely a lot better than the T26. Obviously it doesn't trade up armor or anything like that, but the mobility alone with this thing weighing just over 10 tons and having 400 horsepower, this thing is going to be a racing car compared to the T26. And trust me, if you ever want to compare what the T26 feels like to a BT2/BT5, go on to Gran Turismo, take a Fiat 500R, which is, well, actually, Gran Turismo 4, because then I'm showing my age a little bit. Gran Turismo 4, Fiat 500R, which is one of the slower Fiat 500s in the game, put it alongside a Subaru Impreza W22B. Yeah, you'll see the difference, let's put it that way. Next vehicle is I had to actually write this down in my notes in case I forgot it, the Renault ZB. This is for China. So this is something which, again, China didn't really produce domestic tanks, and I know I'm kind of going back on what I said earlier if you watched the previous part of the video where I talked about the L640 and that I can't really replace it because there's not really anything. I'm kind of going back on what I said there, and if you are not happy with that, I can only apologize, but there is literally nothing for China. It's either I give them a BT5, which I really don't want, or I give them something which you can also put in the French tech tree at a push. Now, the variants that I've seen either have a 13.2 heavy machine gun or a 47. I would want the 47 because that's a bit more forgiving for a new player. And like I said, you can also put this in the French tech tree, so you're killing two birds with one stone once again. So there you go. This would have around, I think, what I saw on the calculator, around 60mm of penetration, which is more than enough. It's only got 2 crew, and it doesn't have the best armor, but its mobility is average, and its gun is pretty alright. So I think we're going to be okay here. So we should be fine. And I think this is pretty acceptable for what it is. And all I will say is it is a solid all-round vehicle. It just doesn't have the crew survivability. But to be honest, survivability is a given in War Thunder. You're probably going to die in one shot anyway, no matter what vehicle you play. Heck, I've died in the Char-2C in one shot, but to be fair, that was an Amarak. But that's besides the point. It's just something we have to consider, and it is definitely something where we can go, yeah, I think this would be a perfectly acceptable addition, and it's something that we can consider for both the Chinese and the French tech tree, just to spice up the French a little bit. Then we come to the German plane. This is the Arado 68. This is basically what happens when you take a H-51 and make it a little bit faster with roughly the same armament. This would be comparable in maneuverability to roughly, from what I've seen in like the wing loading and stuff, to an I-15. Not exactly, because I still think the I-15 would beat this, but it's a lot more forgiving than the Flegels. It also comes with a couple of bombs, but they're not exactly spectacular. They're the 10 kilogram fragmentation bombs. But all I will say is this is definitely something where we can go, yeah, this is better than the Fleagles for teaching a new player to start off with. The Fleagles, whilst it does have good metrics, is definitely something where you can go, yeah, respectable, but we need something different. If the Fleagles had like around 200 to 300 more horsepower, I wouldn't be changing it or wanting to change it, but that's just me. And like I said, I'm using a lot of this term today. We're killing two birds with one stone yet again, because this is another vehicle that people want in the tech tree, so you can put one as a premium, one as a tech tree. See, I am doing multiple things for the War Thunder community. I've even figured out how to help people not buy shit. So, there you go. And finally, we come to the Japanese tank. Now, you'll notice I haven't really considered much in terms of Japanese upgrade. Unfortunately, to get this thing, well, to get the Japanese a better tank, I had to stick with the same chassis. It was either that or I give them the Horu, which I'm sure Japanese players would riot. Because not only are you giving a new player a tank destroyer, which would be a stupid idea, you're also giving the new players a tank destroyer that people actually want in the tech tree. Which, yeah, you could put it in the tech tree, but no. You could also do the same for this, and it would be a bit more forgiving. Now, it does have a lower velocity gun than the Hargo at the moment, but it does have better penetration. This is the Type 97, 98, whatever it is, Kinu. This is a Chiha, not Chiha, Hargo. You can prove how much my brain's having to work today. This is a Hargo modified with the Chiha's gun, so it does have a lower velocity gun, but it at least gets access to heat with 55mm of penetration. Not only does this tank encourage good maneuverability and also its firepower being improved with its heat rounds, it actually also teaches the player a new mechanic, which obviously we all know about it, but a new player won't. Overpressure. This is the only tank that I can pretty much determine from the actual starters that actually teaches them about, shall we say, well, proposed starters, I should say, because Gaijin won't listen to me, but that's besides the point. This is the only one that can teach them about overpressure, because the heat round can overpressure a lot of vehicles at that BR, and I really think this is the way we do it. It's not exactly the most spectacular, but the fact that we can do this with people, I think we're alright for this regard. And let's just say this is something where we can go, yeah, this teaches a new player a few things. Yeah, the Japanese tanks have no armor, but they already knew that anyway, jumping in at the deep end like this. But all I'll say is giving them a tank like this, definitely the step forward we need. And I really do think this is something we need. And not only that, the Hargo is desperate for a replacement, and you can also put this in the tech tree. So not only have I proposed 4 vehicles, I wanted to do 6, but I couldn't find any. 4 vehicles that can change the bad vehicles in this list. I've also proposed that they all go in the tech tree as well, because that's kind of what the starter premiums do anyway. So, bish, bash, bosh. I think I've covered it pretty well. Without further ado, I'm going to leave it there for today, because my voice is killing me, as you can probably imagine. I'm looking forward to seeing what the raw file is after I edit this stuff down. But all I'll say is, I really hope you've enjoyed watching to this point. I can only apologise for the length of the video. We obviously did have to go into a lot of detail about some of these vehicles. But yeah, I hope you agree with some of my changes. If you have any suggestions for the vehicles like the Hajiris and the L640, like what you would change those out for, let me know in the comments. You might know more than I do. And if you don't agree with me in the tier list, let me know. Just seriously, let me know. I want to hear people's opinions. Anyway, I'm going to leave it all to it for today. I hope you enjoyed seeing the starter premium tier list and also suggestions for changing them. And I will see you all on the next one.